A man's lonely journey begins not in the middle of the world, but in the quiet, shadowed corners of his own heart, where silence presses against him like a heavy cloak and doubt moves through his thoughts like a violent storm. He does not step forward with ease. Every movement feels weighted, not because the earth itself resists, but because invisible chains of fear and regret coil around his ankles, pulling him backward as if terrified to let him progress. Each chain whispers the same words over and over again, that he cannot, that he will not, that he should not try. He walks among the living, brushing shoulders with strangers, hearing endless rivers of laughter, conversations and ambition swirling around him, yet he feels like a ghost trapped between worlds. He is there but unseen. He exists but untouched. He breathes but no one notices. The people around him run together in packs, chasing dreams, weaving stories of success and failure. But his own path stretches in solitude, carved by decisions only he can claim, mistakes he cannot erase, and truths he must bear like unshakable burdens. And in this walk, there are moments when silence becomes his loudest and most unforgiving companion, pressing down on his chest until he nearly drowns. It is in those moments that he learns loneliness is not simply about being without others. It is about being locked in endless battle with your own reflection, fighting shadows no one else can see, fighting voices that only he can hear. As days blur into nights and nights fade into mornings, the man notices something far more crushing. The crowd he fears is not only outside him, it is alive inside. That inner crowd is a restless army, fear whispering he will fall again, insecurities sketching him smaller than he truly is, failures replaying their cruel scenes like broken records, broken promises echoing like unfinished songs, regrets coiling like serpents that never let go. Their voices shout louder than the traffic in the streets, louder than the footsteps around him, louder even than his own heartbeat. They remind him of the opportunities he let slip away, the words he left unsaid, the roads he never dared to take. Every stumble, every hesitation, every scar, they return to him in brutal detail. And yet somewhere beyond this storm of noise there is something else, faint but steady, a whisper, a thread of voice fragile but unbreakable, small but eternal. It tells him not to stop, to take one more step no matter how steep, to keep fighting even if every inch of his being screams in pain, to believe that the crowd inside him is not invincible. Slowly, painfully, with every ounce of will, he begins to realize the truth. His greatest enemy has never been the world, nor the people who overlook him, nor the expectations he cannot meet. His greatest enemy is the reflection staring back at him in the mirror, the version of himself that carries fear, doubt, and hesitation like weapons. The journey is relentless, filled with tests that he never imagined he would face. There are nights when he lies awake with his eyes wide open, the ceiling above him a canvas for all the mistakes that play themselves on repeat. Failures rise from the darkness like phantoms, haunting him with reminders of what he could have done differently, how he might have chosen better, where he might have won had he not hesitated. The past claws at him, reminding him of every time he lost, every time he disappointed, every time he broke. And when dawn arrives, it does not bring relief. Instead, mornings often carry their own cruelty. Even the simple act of sitting up feels like climbing an endless mountain, and taking a step out of bed feels like waging a war against his own body. The crowd inside him seizes these moments, growing louder, sharper, crueler. It mocks his weakness, ridicules his struggles, laughs at every attempt to rise again. And yet, in these suffocating moments, he uncovers a truth that changes everything. Strength is not always a scream. Sometimes it is a whisper. Victory is not always visible to others. Sometimes it is silent and unseen. Courage is not always celebrated with applause. Sometimes it exists only in the smallest acts. Sometimes courage is simply breathing again after a sleepless night. Sometimes it is dragging yourself to your feet when every thought tells you to stay down. Sometimes it is just one more step. And in that realization, he begins to see that true courage is not about conquering mountains in leaps, but about refusing to let the crowd inside decide his fate. The path of solitude, which once looked like an endless desert, begins to reveal hidden secrets. It is not empty and it is not meaningless. It is filled with lessons dressed in the robes of struggle, wisdom hidden beneath the skin of pain, and clarity born only out of silence. By walking alone, he learns to listen, not to the world, not to the noise, but to the quiet voice within that tells him who he truly is. He learns to separate the truth of his soul from the masks the world has forced him to wear. Loneliness, which once felt like a punishment, begins to transform. It becomes a sanctuary, a temple, a place where he rebuilds himself brick by brick, piece by piece. Thought by thought, breath by breath, he begins to realize that he does not need applause to be worthy. He does not need eyes watching him to matter. He does not need validation to know his worth. The battle he fights is not for recognition, not for approval, not for the cheers of the crowd. It is for freedom. Freedom from the voices that hold him hostage. Freedom from fear that chains him down. Freedom from the shadow self that tries to drag him under. And in this freedom, he tastes his first victory. Weeks roll into months, and something inside him begins to shift. He starts to notice victories so small that others would not recognize them, but for him, they are monumental. He no longer trembles when doubt whispers. He no longer freezes when fear shouts. Every time he refuses to give up, every time he silences the inner voices that beg him to stop, he grows sharper, harder, stronger. These victories are invisible to the world, but inside him they shine like stars, scattered across a dark night. They carve his soul into iron, mold his spirit into something unbreakable. His journey transforms. It is no longer about escaping loneliness, no longer about fearing solitude. It is about embracing it as a gift, a space of power where he discovers discipline, focus, and a connection to the deepest, rawest parts of his own being. The silence that once threatened to crush him now becomes a canvas. Upon it, he paints his strength, his resilience, his dreams. The very silence that once tortured him becomes the silence that saves him. The outside world continues spinning, buzzing, restless, and loud. Nothing changes there, but he does. He learns to walk at his own rhythm. He no longer sprints to keep up with others, no longer stumbles while comparing his steps to theirs. He knows now that true strength is not speed, it is endurance. It is not how quickly you rise, it is how often you rise after falling. The crowd outside still roars with expectations and judgments, still shouts about what success should look like, but it no longer chains him. He has faced a far greater crowd inside and survived. He has heard the worst his own mind could say, and he has silenced it. And in that silence, he discovers something rare, his worth. Not a worth defined by medals or money or the noise of others, but by persistence, by resilience, by the will to continue when no one is watching. There are still days when loneliness bites like cold wind. There are still nights when shadows creep closer than comfort allows. But he no longer dreads them. Instead, he welcomes them as proof of his journey, as reminders of his battles. Each shadow is proof that he has faced darkness before and still walked forward. Each silence is proof that he can stand alone and not collapse. He knows now with certainty that no noise is louder than his will to rise again, and no doubt is stronger than his determination to keep moving. His lonely journey was never about running from the world or winning the approval of others. It was about facing himself, discovering himself, and becoming whole. And in that, he has already won the greatest battle. His story becomes more than just one man's tale. It becomes a mirror for all who listen, a reminder that the greatest wars are often invisible, fought in silence, fought within. It is proof that the hardest victories are the ones no one else sees, the ones against your own mind, against your own fear. It is proof that the most powerful journey is not the one filled with companions or applause, but the one where you walk alone, only to arrive stronger than anyone could have believed. His lonely journey, once cursed with shadows and doubt, now shines as quiet triumph. He has fought the crowd around him, but far more importantly, he has fought and conquered the enemy within. And in that victory, he does not stand loudly, he does not stand with pride, but he stands unshakably free, unbreakably whole, and eternally strong.